Good morning, this is Nick Augustine here with Mark Scroggins at Scroggins Law Group in Frisco, and we're talking about holiday possession schedules, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right, how are you today, Nick?
I'm doing well, and see I'm wearing my pre-holiday festive.
I noticed that.
Yes.
Yeah, you've got the kind of heavier cloth there, a little flannel.
Because it's 70 today.
Exactly, yeah, 75 around Thanksgiving in Texas.
Right. It matched my Escalade driving here. So
There you go. I saw your post on that. Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Give me a nice loan car, except it doesn't know the speed limit because it thinks the tollway is 65 miles an hour. So
Yeah,
got to be smarter than your car.
it's kind of like the old Sammy Hagar thing. I can't drive 55.
That's right.
There you
I
go,
always
man.
think about that.
There you go.
All right, so thinking about people and families and holidays coming up, we've got November. I mean, it's Thanksgiving next week.
Right.
Christmas is right around the corner.
Right.
So what does that look like when we're looking at the holidays and we've got things that are maybe already going kind of funny and we're anticipating problems?
Sure. You know, the big thing that people need to understand, okay, holiday schedules supersede your regular weekend possession schedules, okay? So a lot of people get wrapped up with, oh, well, you know, this is a third weekend or this is a fifth weekend. And so because of that, I've got, you know, the weekend right after Thanksgiving. And no, you don't, okay? Where people really get confused, it's different from when I was a kid, we got out on Wednesday. Man, we didn't get the week off.
Right.
It seems like most of the schools now have gone to the week off. So what is important is the language is when the child is released for Thanksgiving or
Right.
for that holiday, okay? And so that's what needs to be determined. That is going to tell you when the possession for Thanksgiving, right now we're just talking about Thanksgiving, okay? But that's going to tell you when that possession actually begins, okay? And so depending on if you have an expanded standard possession schedule or if you have a standard possession schedule, that's going to determine, you know, is your pickup time when the child gets out of school, or is it going to be 6 p.m.? And then the holiday schedule is going to supersede what the regular standard possession order is. So like if somebody's got a standard possession order and they've got first, third, and fifth weekends, you know, so, and remember, we always calculate those by Friday. So let's see, Thanksgiving this year is on the 28th, okay? So, and this is one of the 4 months during the year this year that has a fifth weekend. So this weekend,
We have more this year than other years.
well, in this month
Okay.
anyway. So every year there are four fifth weekends.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Right.
And this year it just happens to be that one of those is Thanksgiving. Okay. So Thanksgiving is the 28th. The following Friday is the 29th, which is a fifth weekend. So typically under a standard possession order, you would have possession that weekend. Because it's Thanksgiving and it is part of the Thanksgiving break, it supersedes that, so that does not come into play, okay? The other big issue is like tomorrow is February.
Let's hope not.
Okay, it is
I'm
Thanksgiving
ready for that.
coming up, so it is November, November 22nd. So the question is, when are the kids released for the Thanksgiving break? Are they released on the 22nd? Because if that's when they're released, that's when the holiday period of possession is going to begin, okay? Or are they actually released on Tuesday the 26th or Wednesday the 27th? So those are the things to look at, okay? So those are going to be the big factors to consider at that point. And here's the other thing to consider, you know, especially, well, there are two pieces of advice here that play similarly, okay? If you're in the middle of litigation and the other side is really jacking with you about that, you can always seek some relief, okay? But it's more of relief after the fact,
Right.
okay? Because if you are going to, let's say that your holiday period of possession begins tomorrow and your spouse or the other parent is telling you, you can't come get the kids, I'm not turning them over, blah, 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 blah. Well, just because they tell you that does not give rise to an enforcement motion. You have to actually attempt to go over and pick up the kids, and you have to be refused, and that then gives rise, okay? So let's say that you were supposed to have them on Friday, dad refuses to turn them over. Could you seek emergency relief?
Right.
You might not be able to get emergency relief. You might, it depends on the court. But unless you can show that the kids are in some sort of danger, it is not technically an emergency.
Right.
Okay. But could you file something and possibly get into court on Tuesday or Wednesday? Probably on Wednesday, not necessarily on Tuesday, but you never know what a court will do. But the other thing is, you need to be careful of that because you don't want to piss off the court, you know?
Right.
And the court has, you know, all these judges have families and kids and stuff too, and they want to be able to do that. So my point is, you know, before you go in locked and loaded, you better make sure that you've got the right ammunition, okay? So, you know, if you're going in with something that's kind of half-baked, expect to get your ass handed to you, okay?
So, and you said also that the time is elapsed, you know, if we're having a problem where, you know, we didn't get possession, so now we're kind of shorted. So that's what we're kind of dealing with.
Yeah, and so you can get makeup stuff. And I mean, now here's the other thing. I mean, judges don't like dealing with these types of disputes because they think it's petty, and also because they believe that it negatively impacts the kids. So my very strong suggestion to a parent would be, if the other parent is going to play those types of games, raise it with the court, but after the fact, just kind of deal with it, let your kids have a good holiday, and then come back and deal with it after the fact. I mean, trying to deal with just a shit ton of litigation right before the fact, unless you've got something where it's like, y'all are flying up to New York to be with family or something like that, that's a different situation. That would give rise to an emergency type of deal. But if everybody's going to still be here, you know, in the Dallas area, okay, let it go, come back and deal with it. The other person's going to look like an idiot.
Okay. So Mark, we talked about what to expect with the holidays coming up. What are some common problems that people might be looking for? What things usually arise? Like,
well, I mean,
issues?
yeah, I mean, you start getting, the biggest problem that arises is when people don't really understand what the possession schedule says. Okay, so we talked about how that arises around Thanksgiving. Let's talk about that same thing around Christmas. Okay,
Sure.
Christmas is a little bit better defined, I think. You don't have it's generally not such a moving target. Okay, and what a standard possession schedule says is that one parent gets the first half of the holiday break. Okay, so from the time school is released until noon on the 28th, the other has from noon on the 28th until 6 p.m. the day before school starts, or, you know, the return to school the day that school starts. Okay, and then it's the opposite the next year. So the key is making sure that people understand what it says. So what I just referenced is how the statute reads now. Okay,
Right.
Back when I got divorced in 2003, that's not what the statute read. Okay, the statute read that the exchange took place at noon on the 26th. Okay, and so just because that's what the statute says, that doesn't necessarily mean what you and your spouse had negotiated. So know what is in the order. Okay, know what it says. You know, I still have where we do custom orders today that it's turned over at noon on Christmas Day, or it's turned over at noon on the 26th, or some different variation, and there can be notice requirement. I mean, so know what your order says. That's the biggest thing.
Sure.
And then the best piece of advice is kind of like what we were talking about before. You want to make sure that this is all about your kids, and you're not playing some petty bullshit game with
Right.
your former spouse or with the child's other parent, because that will reflect poorly on you. It's a whole thing of, two wrongs don't make a right.
Right.
So as difficult as it is to put your ego aside, that is absolutely what you need to do. You need to go ahead and, let's say if you are, your time, you've got the first half of Christmas this year, okay? So kids get out on, I don't know, I'm just gonna pick the 20th.
Sure.
Okay? I don't even know if that's what day of the week that is, but let's just say it's the 20th, okay? You go over, you try to exercise, you try to pick up the kids, and the child's mother says, no, you're not allowed to get them until, the 22nd on such and such a day.
Because they were dropped off late after the last time, and you owe me 6 hours.
Right, okay? And that's the whole thing, 2 wrongs don't make a right again.
Sure.
And so what you do, instead of sitting there and getting into a fight and start dog cussing
And
stuff.
calling the cops.
Yeah, exactly.
Just the neighbors love that. It looks
Right.
really good.
It looks great. And here's the other thing, people don't seem to understand a lot of the time. Should the police enforce a possession schedule based on the order? Yes, they should. Will they? Very, very, very rarely. They just don't do it.
It's not their job.
They just don't do it. Their whole, well, it really is their job, but they don't see it that way. You know, they'd say, that's a civil matter, you need to talk to your
That's
lawyer.
what I always see when I watch a lot of live PD, and they say,
Right.
civil matter, call your lawyer, we got people shooting each other.
Well, and even when they're showing something, you know, showing the paper, you know, right there with the kids, and they just won't
It's
do
one of
anything.
those, don't make us come back here, please.
Yeah, and so,
Your
but
judge
the
will
point
sit.
is, when you get something that kind of gets out of hand like that,
Yeah.
the smart thing is to, you know, do what you're supposed to do, which means you go over, you attempt to exercise possession. If you are turned away, nobody's home, something like that, make sure you document it, you've got the ability to prove it, you know, and then you deal with it later, you know, and if you try the next day, well, you didn't turn the kids over, you were supposed to do that yesterday, when can I get them today? So make sure that you are establishing that you have attempted to try to get your kids out.
Sure, and make a record of that you can produce later. I mean, what
That's
do you
exactly
maybe
right.
use the Our Family Wizard, or you know, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you know, here's
Whatever
something.
you're using.
Well, here's something that I would tell people to do all the time. You know, we've all got phones, and all these phones, you know, are smartphones now. Unless, although there is a movement going back to the dumb phones, so to speak.
I'd like one.
So,
my mom has a flip phone. I'm like, can I have?
I was in a meeting with a guy yesterday who had one. So, and there is something about that I kind of like. But my point is, with everybody else, go over there, you ring the doorbell, nobody's coming to the doorbell, or they tell you to go pound sand, you know. So what you do is you turn around and take a video, you know, hey, it's such and such a date, it's such and such a time, I'm here at such and such an address to try to exercise possession. I've been turned away or nobody's home, turn it off and leave.
Important note, Mark, does not mean that you should go Facebook Live with that.
That's exactly right.
Right.
That's exactly right. So that doesn't do anybody any good, and then it makes it look like, you know, your pettiness can almost equate to being turned away.
Right.
Okay. Because what the court will be really pissed off that someone did not turn the child over when they should have. However, the court also wants the kids to have as normal a break as they possibly can, and will deal with the malfeasor, so to speak, at a later date. Okay, so that's where it's hard. I mean, you know, and putting your ego aside, and how dare you keep my kids from me? And I get it, I really do, and we will go and try to deal with that. And, but there's a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. Okay, and what you don't want to do is really sacrifice your chances down the road because you went over and you were refused, and then you acted like an idiot, and the police are called, and all of a sudden, you know, you've just provided the other side with something to make it look like you are unhinged.
Right.
Okay, so be smart.
There you go. Mark, there are so many things that can come up, as we've talked about, how many options that the fabric can unweave, and things can go wrong.
Right.
So when we see potential problems, or we know that the other side, we know what types of things and when they start to get fussy with things, what can we do to cut things off before they go crazy? And so we're kind of trying to maybe head off some problems of the past and negotiate solutions short of going into court.
Okay, so you've got a bunch of different options, and it really kind of depends on where you are. So if you're in the middle of a lawsuit, call your lawyer. Okay, and then there are different options where you talk about negotiation. Okay, so you could have an informal settlement conference. You could have communications just between the lawyers. You could try to set a quick mediation. Those are different ways that you can do that stuff. Now, if a parenting facilitator or a parenting coordinator was added to a temporary order, or if the case is done and you've got a parenting facilitator or a parenting coordinator, you go to them. I mean, that's what the whole thing is about. Now, the thing to understand, and this is something that I think everybody should understand, there's a difference between a parenting facilitator and a parenting coordinator. While they do the same thing, okay, one is there to be able to testify, the parenting facilitator, and the other cannot, the parenting coordinator. I am much more of a fan of a parenting facilitator because If someone is the primary problem on reaching any agreements on anything, or is just being a major pain in the ass, they can go in and tell the judge that, okay? Most orders also include that either party or a lawyer or the court can request the parenting facilitator to prepare a report saying that, you know, Johnny's dad is the big problem in this. You know, that's the reason. You know, mom's being reasonable, dad is just, it's all about trying to screw over mom, okay? And she can testify to that, or he can testify to that, meaning the parenting facilitator. That's awesome. A parenting coordinator can, okay? It's great in theory, but my thought generally is, if you need a parenting coordinator, then what you really need is a parenting facilitator. Because if you need somebody that's going to sit there and act as a referee and help doing it, you need that they've got a little stroke. You know, otherwise it's worthless, in my opinion. But that's just me. So there's some good things that you can do. Talk to your lawyer first and foremost if you're in the middle of litigation. If you've got a good relationship with that lawyer, even after the litigation, pick up the phone. You know, they're happy to talk to you and say, here's what I would suggest. If they're not happy to talk to you, then, well, that tells you a little bit about them. The other thing is, you know, if you've got a parenting facilitator or a parenting coordinator that is assigned to the case, you know, whether you're in the middle of litigation or if it's after the fact, use them. That's what they are for. And those can be great options, especially after the suit. Because you're not spending money on a couple of mouthpieces, you know, which that gets really, really expensive. Parenting facilitators are expensive, but not to the same level.
You know, it makes me think that people need to pick and choose their battles and kind of know when. What I see is, if you are trying to negotiate and keep things out of court and keep things from blowing up and getting really expensive and protracted, the routes that you talked about are good, and documenting that as you go. Because it might take 2 or 3 of these times. After the third time, you might actually need to go to court. But you have, look at all the best efforts we've done, everything short of here at the front end.
Yeah, I mean, and they're just, you know, this is just kind of a starting point, okay? What different options are common, what different options are out there. Obviously, there's more than what I talked about. But it's a great starting point. And, you know, get your ducks in a row. If you need to talk to a lawyer, talk to a lawyer. I mean, you know, if you have something gnawing at you that is telling you, hey, I should probably talk to counsel about this, you should probably talk to counsel about that, because here's one of the other things that, you know, people forget about. If you are complaining about a specific act, okay, the further you get away from that specific act, the less important it is going to be. Okay, if it was so damn important to you, why didn't you do something about it right then?
Right.
Okay, so if there's a big deal, man, reach out and do something. If it's not, just kind of bide your time, collect your evidence, look at the resources that are around you that I just talked about, and call on one of those, and you know, and you'll get clarity on which way to go.
Exactly. All right, well, Mark, if we've exhausted all of our efforts in trying to settle things out of court and we need to go talk to our judge, how does that look? What should we be prepared for?
Well, you need to make sure that your ducks are in a row. Make sure that this is actually an emergency, okay? So you get people all the time to think, well, can't we just get a temporary restraining order, okay? A temporary restraining order is not something that is supposed to just be signed by a court as, you know, anybody who comes in and they just rubber stamp it, right? It's supposed to be to prevent some sort of irreparable harm from happening, okay? What we talked about a little bit ago in holiday situations is, if you've got something where you're going to, let's say you're from the Pacific Northwest, okay, and you've got tickets to fly to Seattle, which, God almighty, that is a long flight. You know,
I've done it.
4.5 hours.
It's awful.
Yeah, it's not good. And
bring back the Concorde.
yeah,
You know?
I agree. I hear actually they're doing something like that
They
before
should.
too long, or looking into it.
I'll vote for that.
But my point is, if you've got prepaid stuff that you're going up there, and whether you're staying with family or you've got a hotel, but you've got all these tickets and everything, and the other side is jacking with you and isn't going to allow you to, you know, pick up the kids. Let's talk about in a situation where Thanksgiving's next week, okay? Most kids are getting out for Thanksgiving tomorrow on Friday. You go to pick up the kids, you've got tickets to leave on Saturday to go to Seattle, and mom refuses to turn those kids over, should you look at filing a temporary restraining order? Yes, you should, okay? Now, in that regard, there is irreparable harm because of, in my opinion, okay, and that's just my opinion, a judge, someone with that black robe has to make that determination. But I would feel comfortable going into court on that because you've already got these prepaid tickets, everybody's going, you're trying to take, Junior up there too, and that has been withheld. So could you possibly get in there and force that? You could. Forcing the return of a child doesn't happen just with a temporary restraining order. You could have to file what's called a writ of habeas corpus. There are all kinds of different things that you could do, okay? But if you want to do that, could you? Yes. Could you get some relief? Yes, in a lot of different circumstances. Is it very expensive? Yes. Is there a chance that the other side could have to pay your fees? Yes.
Is it a trip of a lifetime and you're only going to have one shot with pictures with relatives that are in their elder years?
Right. And so there are a bunch of factors there. Now, on the other hand, if everybody's just staying around, is just staying around the Dallas area, and so the first weekend of December is the weekend or 2 weekends following Thanksgiving, so 8 days later. Would I be trying to rush in with a TRO? Probably not, unless you've got a bunch of other people, a bunch of family coming in from all over the country or out of the country.
Kind of the reverse.
Yeah, so there are situations where you want to do that. There's situations where you don't. So if you've got a question, consult a lawyer. What you don't want to do is if you're going to have to go back and see that judge again, which you will, okay, because if you get a temporary restraining order, there's going to be a hearing over everything within a period of 2 weeks. You better make sure you got your ducks in a row, because if the court finds out that, hey, you got a temporary restraining order, but it really was a little disingenuous on what you put forward, they're going to just absolutely crush you, or they should. If you don't have all of your ducks in a row and you made it look, you went over there and instead of acting like a grown-up and walking off after doing what you need to do, and the police were called and you created a scene and the kids are there crying and all that, guess what? You look just as bad, okay? So be smart about things, and it's hard, man. When you're talking about your kids, the emotions run high, okay? But you've got to pause. Do not act, do not react. Pause when agitated and don't react. Talk to a lawyer about what should I do.
Scream into your pillow a little if you need to.
And you know what? That's good, man. Use one of those meditation things.
Right.
Calm and headspace.
What are they, like the bowl bong?
Hey, that's good too. You go to drum therapy. There are a lot of different things that can work.
That's right.
So, but that's the thing. Basically, be careful. Use common sense, which doesn't always come into play on stuff when emotions run out.
Right, exactly.
So, and reach out and call a lawyer. Make sure that you're doing the right thing.
All right. Best way to get in touch.
You can always get us at the office, 214-469-3100, or you can just send me an email directly, mark@scrogginslawgroup.com. Thanks.
Thank you all. And please do share this video podcast, as you find it, because you just never know who has exactly these types of questions and they're not telling you. So
Exactly.
help them find the right stuff. Thank you all.